instructor here, and we're about to get going and teach you how to go from idea to finished draft in just 8 weeks. There's 8 class meetings that we'll use to help you get from, no matter your skill level, no matter where you're starting from, this is open to people no matter, of any experience coming into screenwriting. Maybe you're just getting started, or maybe you have a little experience and want to learn to develop a method that is a little bit more procedural and step-by-step, and you want to just practice organizing and making sure that you have all of the process down before you move into your next script. So let's get going with our presentation. So let's start with just the basic troubleshooting slides. Remember, you can review these, and check if they are. You'd think I could actually talk on my own streams. If you're having problems with audio being heard or speaking out loud, then you can review these at any time. So there's some nice tips for if you're having issues with Discord. Maybe you're watching along on our recording at this point, but this is actually live interactive classes. And there are going to be several of these a week with multiple boot camps that will take you from idea to finished script for pilot, feature, rewrite, and upcoming playwriting class too. We have events and workshops, many hours of instruction per week. We have some paid classes and some free promotional classes too, which you are now taking part in. But also on Saturdays from 4 to 6, we have our Writer's Lab where you can come in with any specific questions or obstacles that you're running into in your script, and we can, either me or other pro guest instructors will come and be able to help you work through scenes, stuff that you're struggling with, or any topics that you just want to hear more about. So a little about me. My name is Connor. I've been writing feature-length scripts for about 11 years. Moved to LA in about 2015 with no connections at all. Took me 2 years to get signed after that when I placed in the top 10 of the Launchpad contest in 2017. Have been assigned and working writer since then. Have since placed in the Nickel Fellowship quarterfinals, semifinals, and wrote an episode of Shudder's Creepshow back in 2019. I have a thriller script that's been set up at a production company in town, and have had other scripts at various times set up at other production companies. I'm one of these writers who's never had something produced yet, but has been working and doing this as my job in the industry for about 5 years now, and I also do a fair number of rewrites and helping both production companies and writer-directors kind of fix problems in their scripts before they move to production. So I teach our boot camps and weekly Writer's Lab, and our other main instructor is Nacho. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hey guys, yeah, my name is Nacho, and to be clear, I'm not a pro screenwriter. My background is more film distribution, development. I started out in Hong Kong selling low-budget martial arts movies. Worked at a major studio for 5 years, developing, licensing international co-productions. And currently I work at a augmented reality company, develop content for AR glasses. And, so I teach the screenwriting the classes and workshops here at Script Camp that are about screenwriting
fundamentals. Yes. So things like words on the page, how to actually arrange text in such a way that it suggests visual information, like those really kind of ground level courses. Nacho does a fantastic job teaching those, and he also runs many workshops and other events on the server. So nice to meet you all. Thank you for being here. Again, this is live interactive classes that we can actually, the students are frequently called on to weigh in, so we can work with them on their loglines, on their pages, on anything that they need to improve on and get feedback on. So here's where you can we'll be displaying our chat from all of our various streaming sites. We're streaming on Twitch, on Twitter, and of course, every week, if you want to participate, you will have to sign up and join our Discord server. Discord is a free chat program and social media type site that you can sign up for, and make sure to do that before coming by and signing up for membership. So, what's the boot camp? We go from idea to first draft. First drafts are usually not going to be amazing, but remember, this is not as much focused on giving you a script that's going to get you one specific tangible result. And you shouldn't look at screenwriting as, I need to write my script so I can get my movie made, or this is my one story I have to tell. Remember, think of Script Camp as more like going to the gym. This is like where you're going to be doing the reps and lifting the dumbbells in order to build the muscles that you need. to become a screenwriter, not so much to get you any specific script. It's not like we have a grading system. We're not going to promote your script or sell it or help you get it made in any kind of way. This is to help put you on the path to becoming a screenwriter and the sort of generator of unlimited content and ideas that are the kind of people that work in Hollywood. So we have 2-hour weekly sessions, including this one here. This is a free preview class, so this is not part of the actual run of the course, but this is 8 weeks for feature, 6 weeks for the TV pilot, and 4 weeks for our rewrite bootcamp, and it's going to be 6 weeks for playwriting coming up. Let's look at the schedule. So, week number 1. So, we're going to talk about sort of why this story, and at the very broadest level, we'll look at originality, and even if you don't know too much about the themes of your story yet, we can start at the very beginning looking at the kind of dramatic argument that your stories are going to make. And we can ask questions like, why is this sort of relevant now and relevant always? And these don't have to be complicated, big, artsy-fartsy kind of questions. This is like, a lot of good stories are relevant simply because they are relatable to people in whatever time that they come out in, but they also touch on broader questions or bigger themes that are always going to be, sort of etched into human character. So we'll also talk a lot about loglines in these opening weeks, and we put a lot of emphasis on this logline. Loglines, do they matter a lot? Some say yes, some say no, but you have to know how they kind of work and how to write them and what to look for in them. A logline being, of course, the one-sentence expression of the idea for your movie. So it's sort of the answer to the question, what is this about? So there's quite a lot of nuance that goes into the construction of loglines, so we want to make sure that you have that logline in place early on, both to communicate your story to other people and also to be able to keep your own construction of that narrative on track and make sure that you aren't deviating too far from your original intentions and the promises that you've made at early stages. So we focus a lot of time on getting that logline right. And just overall with Script Camp, we do emphasize this method of preloading and front-loading a lot of the work that goes into writing a feature film, which you can kind of choose whether or not you want to put that at the beginning or put that at the end. Some people start in this more sort of discovery kind of phase where they just sort of wing it and then use that as almost like your sketches or your outlining for the next draft, which will be the more coherent one that makes more sense and adds up more. But we like to put as much of that as possible in the beginning, because in the world of screenwriting, so often it's collaborative and you're going to be working with producers or managers or other people who are going to want to get a clear picture of the story early on. So you need to be able to kind of write without actually doing what we call going to pages, where you start formatting in script format. So much of screenwriting happens before you even start typing in 12-point courier on the page. So I think we have some mic feedback coming from somebody. We might just have to server mute there. Okay, so let's look at the schedule after week 1. We'll talk about outlining in week 2, so that's going to be the broad strokes and what we call the story beat summary, or often I just call this the summary, and that's kind of the rough events of your story and the order that they're going to go in, with the proper headings over each section that tells you this is this structural moment, this is your act break, this is your midpoint. Once you do this enough, you won't necessarily have to use this exact method or any of these exact methods anymore. If you find a way that works better for you, then you're always encouraged to go ahead and use that, but this is just intended to build some foundational organization skills that you're going to be able to modify and adjust based on just your own methods as you move forward. So we have that story beat summary on week 2. Week 3 is going to be all about scene cards, which is going to be a full paragraph for each scene. So we want to make sure we nail down what happens on every page of your script before you start the script, which might seem very foreign or different to you or strange if you're used to this more sort of discovery-based writing process. But again, with screenwriting, there are not a lot of kind of discovery writers, as they say in prose. So we're going to be trying to put a lot of the work of figuring out what goes where and what events happen when and what is motivating what and what are the major character arcs and what are the major things I'm getting at, all before you even start formatting on the page. So that's why we spend the first 3 weeks on nothing but pre-writing. So logline, summary, and then scene cards. So you're going to know before you begin what happens on every page of your story. That might sound like overkill, but Nacho, do you want to weigh in on how that process kind of how that changed how you approach scripts yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been writing since high school, so I've been writing screenplays for a long time. I've tried lots of different, outlining methods. I mean, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on, how to outline the script, what story structure is. But when I saw Connor's scene cards for the first time, I was like, oh my God, like, why would anybody do this? It looks like so much work. They're so detailed. Why not just jump into the script and start writing? I mean, a lot of people have at least, done bare bones outlining before they're writing a screenplay. But this final step that Connor, introduced me to, which is like writing out a list of all the scenes in your script, like in prose, like kind of a paragraph or so, like what is actually happening in that scene. I tried it and I found that sort of like tricking your brain to start writing, or actually writing the pages, right? So when I got to the pages, it's like I was no longer spending a whole bunch of time figuring out like what's happening in the scene. And it sounds like it could be restrictive, but I mean, you're not like, there's no outline that like locks you into something. You're not obligated. You can always come up with new ideas and stuff while you're writing. But I found that the pages just were flying, much faster. I went from, it used to take me about 6 months to a year to write a script. And after I started working with Connor, down to about maybe 3 to 4 weeks for the outlining process, and then about 2 to 3 weeks to actually write the pages. Like the pages for writing a full feature-length script is way faster than it used to be. So I've been able to write 3 scripts in the boot camps this way, in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Find their own specific like process, but this is a fantastic starting point, and for me it feels like a lot more efficient than what I've been doing before.
Awesome. Thanks, Nacho. Yeah, so if this is new to you, I say just give it a try. You're going to be maybe broadening your horizon and expanding what your previous method or process has been. But this is all in service of just nailing what happens before you start writing, so that when we're doing pages, you don't have to focus on, gosh, what happens in this scene. You already know, and you can put all that energy into presenting that visual information on the page in the most efficient, evocative, clear, and concise way. Okay, let's proceed. So, so basically the summary is first half of the program is going to be pre-writing and finding out what happens on every page. Then the second half of the program is actually every week is going to be, you're going to be finishing a certain number of pages, about 20 pages a week, which is, if you're writing on just weekdays, that's going to be 4 pages a day, which is very doable. And then that's just the sort of goal to keep you up with the milestones of the rest of the class. Obviously, there's no penalties or anything for falling behind. There's no grades. Script Camp is like instruction, but without the sort of, final mark kind of thing. This is, again, to build your skills. It's like a personal trainer system, almost. Not quite personal if there's groups, but you get the idea. So week 4 will be when we start the script. March 11th, that's when you'll be writing 20 pages a week from then to the end. So we go, week 5 is transitions, moving from the first act to the second act. Week 6 is going to be the first half of the second act. Some people call it Act 2A. Week 7, Act 2B. And then Week 8 is going to be your final act. Maybe you're not familiar with any of this terminology, and this is all brand new to you as well. So we'll be going over acts and many more things in this intro class. We have many topics to cover. And of course, during the second half of class, that is when we'll be going over student loglines to help them refine their idea before the boot camp starts and make sure that you have as strong a base as possible before you do anything else. Okay, what's the Writer's Lab? That's intensive weekly script development sessions, 2 hours, 4 to 6 on Saturdays, in which me and other pro screenwriters will be available to help you work through problems with your projects. So make sure to drop by those. How to enroll? You can purchase the paid bootcamp on its own, just buy a single course, but your better sort of value is going to come from the unlimited membership, which is $49 a month. Comes with a 2-week free trial to decide if you don't like it, but it is going to give you access to all of our classes, boot camps, writers' labs. That's over 60 hours of classes a month. Private Discord channels and video library, which will contain a recording of every single class, much like this one. So there's some other tiers of membership too, including Basic for just $5 a month that is going to give you 8 classes a month still, so I think it's honestly a pretty good value still. Still gives you access to all of our PowerPoints, all of our video library. Doesn't include the lab or boot camps, but and then finally we have this tier of coaching, which is currently full, but we'll announce and let you guys know if more slots for this become available. But that is going to also include monthly coverage and consultations with myself. So yeah, feel free to go to our website, scriptcamp.net/membership, and you will be able to see details for all those different memberships. But make sure to sign up before you come to your first class. So let's get into this. Script finished in 8 weeks. Is this going to be good? No. And that's fine. No one's first drafts are good. Scorsese's first drafts or whatever are not good. So we have to understand that first drafts the intention is not for it to be perfect. And moreover, even the third draft might not be perfect, because if you're just starting at this, your skill level is not that high. No one starts good at almost anything, and it's a little silly when someone writes one script and then is like, how do I get this made? Who do I send this to get an agent and to sell it and to start my career? It's a little bit like saying, I finished my first painting. How do I get this in a museum? This takes many years in order to get to the stage where you have the ability to execute feature ideas consistently on a decent time frame of 8 to 12 weeks and with a high level of quality. So let's just move beyond the idea that any individual script has to be good, whatever good even means. Are you going to worry when you're lifting weights at the gym if any individual bicep curl was good? No, you have like a million reps to do, so get going. Before we begin, remember that we have to untether ourselves from our ideas to some extent. Remember that even in the best case scenario, as a pro writer, your ideas are going to be bought and rewritten by someone else potentially, or the director, or changed on the day of shooting. Actors are going to come up with new lines. You're going to you might even get fired off your own movie. So it's going to be changed. And if your ideas are so good that they cannot be improved by collaboration, you should be writing webcomics or self-publishing novels, basically, in which case you will have full 100% creative control at all times. But even moving into traditional publishing, for instance, you still have feedback from literary agents, for instance, and there's always going to be other voices that are changing your work. Screenwriting is one of the ones that gets changed much more than novels or plays do, for instance, so you do have to just detach from your ideas and realize it's not like you can never do a better version of that idea later, first of all. Second of all, that even if you have a good idea and you do it and you don't nail it, you're going to have more good ideas. And the goal of taking these classes, and moreover the goal of improving at your writing, is to become the generator of unlimited ideas and content. So, before we begin, also remember that we want to be executing scripts between 8 and 12 weeks for the most part. You don't want to be working on one script for years, and that is why we urge and challenge you in this class to use scripts that are kind of newer and fresher ideas. But just remember that this is work, this takes a long time, no one starts out good at this. So in the ideas that you're picking, you're going to pick ideas that you are less attached to or invested in, not some old idea that you've been kicking around for many, many years. You can pick those if you really want to, but this is an opportunity for you to pick something that's like, oh, that would be awesome, but no one would ever make that, or when would I ever find the time to write that? This is the time. So if you're spending more than 6 months on a script, remember, change up your process, but it's your job to write many, many bad scripts in order to kind of get to these good ones down the line. So on this page, we have many sort of myths and assumptions about screenwriting that are all untrue to some extent. There's kernels of truth in some of these things. I'm not going to go over everything right now just because we have so much else to do. But you can look at these just to get a sense of this is what people assume to be true, and many of these are simply not. Remember, writers don't have full control over things that manifest on screen or the way that those things manifest on screen. Bad movies are not always written by terrible writers. Remember, there's many, many cooks in the kitchen, and part of being a writer is trying to leave the script in as good a state as you can before it's done, and help protect it from all these voices that are changing it, but we don't always succeed. And movies turn out bad a lot of the time. And when you actually learn more about the process, it starts to seem, to me at least, like some kind of minor miracle that any good movies get made at all, considering the difficulties of the process. So don't worry too much about these things. Feel free to browse this if you want, but and the realities page, which follows it. Some of these things are slightly altered just due to, I don't know if in COVID time you necessarily have to be in LA to be a working TV writer right now, but it is trending more back in that direction, and you should be used to the idea that moving to Los Angeles is going to be a big thing that will help with your career, both in terms of networking and also just getting to those opportunities that are only here. This is a bunch of doom and gloom stuff about how difficult it is and how low it pays and all of these things, but you're here because you want to do this. So I think that you can review this slide later if you want, but the point is we're here because we love it. And if you can, they always say, if you can picture yourself doing something else for a living, then that's probably what you should do instead, because a lot of this, it's an uphill climb that takes many years and frankly just kind of sucks. So if you love it, you'll stay here. If you don't, you shouldn't do it. And it's as simple as that. Here's how to be a feature writer. Step 1, get really, really, really good at writing movies. Step 2, you didn't actually do step 1, you're moving on before you're actually ready. Go back and really actually do step 1. Everyone, including myself, I was like trying to query right out of college. Everyone overestimates their skill at the beginning once they cross a certain threshold. I find writers are either in the camp of way vastly overestimating their skill or really underestimating their skill and being like, I hate my work, I'm terrible, I can't even look at my old pages. So everyone's going to fall somewhere on that spectrum, but writers are usually kind of like on one side or the other. But you really have to put in the years and the reading in order to get good at this. So you've got to be reading constantly. If you don't have the energy or stamina to read consistently at least 1 to 3 pro scripts a week, which again, scripts don't take that long to read, then there's no way you're going to have time to write a script if you can't even find the time to read them. So you must be reading professional scripts at least one every single week. So that is how you get good at screenwriting. And remember, you didn't really do step 1, actually go back and do step 1. So step 3 is going to be, you want to make this portfolio of 3 to 5 riveting and undeniably incredible scripts, which, you know, are going to be the ones that your portfolio is sort of the things that you're consistently sending out. And those are the things that are going to be used to get you attention and meetings, and maybe one of them at some point, possibly, someone might want to develop to get it made, but that's not usually the goal. The goal is to get work, to be able to take open writing assignments and to pitch on intellectual property, and moreover, just to get read and act as a sample for you to put you on the path to getting these writing jobs. Don't think of any of your scripts as things that one day will definitely get made, because nothing definitely gets made, no matter who you are in Hollywood. So, again, you can't be too attached to these ideas. Screenwriters, things don't pan out like we want them to all the time. So if you really want to preserve those stories and they mean so much to you, you should probably write them as novels first, and then try to adapt them, which is like a separate sort of set of skills. But regardless, writing features is a job for people who have to become okay with the idea that you're going to lose most of your work, and it won't come out exactly like you want. So regardless of that, you want to make that eventual, spend years making that portfolio of like 3 really good scripts. You're going to submit those to contests and fellowships and send them to the people that you're networking with, especially at the assistant level in LA, who will eventually become the higher level people at production companies and management companies that you want to rep you or to work with you. You're going to get repped by a manager at some point, and work with that manager to either get this writing assignment, possibly pitching on writing assignments, or work with them to develop a spec that they will have a lot of input on that they can take out, which means they'll send it to various players who might be able to meet with you in town. This takes a long time to get a manager to the place where they are willing to go out with a script, because it's their sort of reputation on the line, and anything that they send around, it reflects on them, and they consider it part of their sort of work as well. And different managers take different approaches to this, and some are more hands-on and some are more hands-off, but ultimately they're not going to go out with something unless they are really, really happy with it. You're going to take a bunch of what are called general meetings after you go out with the script for the first time, and then I've done, I think, 3 rounds of general meetings now. But this is when you will meet with various people at production companies and in development, or potentially even management companies, that they will want to just get to know who you are and the kind of stuff that you want to make and what you're interested in, so that they can maybe consider you for stuff in the future. You're going to, at some point, hopefully be able to take specific meetings on a script if someone is interested in setting it up at that production company. You're going to work with producers or other players to develop a spec, or maybe even work on assignments more. You have to do a lot of this for free, and you have to rewrite a lot, so get used to doing stuff for free. And then you're going to do the preceding 2 steps about 500,000 billion times. As various projects fall apart or don't manifest as you would want them to, just get used to that too. And then you'll finally get something sold or produced, be able to join the Writers Guild and party until the heat death of the universe. So just remember, this is really difficult because getting good feedback is hard. it's difficult to gauge where your skill level is and where it needs to be. A script is just a long document, and I know the novelists are laughing at me because they're like, no, it's not. But a 100-page long story is like not exactly easy to take a cursory glance through and discern its quality right away. And people also just have a wide spectrum of reactions to even universally praised work. You can go to Amazon and search for 1-star reviews of your favorite movie and find a lot of intelligent, potentially, people who hate that thing. So, like, it's a game of roulette or chance or dice or whatever you want to call it. Remember that people who don't read scripts for a living that you send them to are often just going to want to support you when they don't know what to really read for. They don't know how to analyze a story, whereas people who do read scripts for a living and actually do have the skills to analyze a story, they often either charge money for their coverage or they are going to be predisposed to not like your script if it doesn't blow them away right out of the gate. So it can be tough to get those reads or get good feedback from almost anyone, and good writers groups are just hard to find and keep going. Furthermore, the reward cycle of the kind of create, share, reward, art cycle thing where you like, hey, I have an idea for something, I make that thing, I show that thing to people, they clap, we all go home. That, like, the reward part is missing for a lot of this, and this is so hard to get into, and it's such an unintuitive form of writing in a lot of ways that many of your scripts are only going to result in a slew of negative notes, which can be really discouraging at the start. You're probably doing this because you are an entertainer, but you have to, like, rehearse and perform in empty theaters, so to speak, for many years to the annoyance or boredom or derision and booing of the audience that you have to beg into attending, and like that's all very kind of psychologically difficult to weather and to keep moving forward and say, I still want to get better at this, I still want to do this, and I think I still have it in me to produce what is a very difficult document to make, and it's a very difficult thing to make of high quality. People are going to encourage you to give this up and get a real job, so obviously you should probably have some kind of other job as you pursue this. Why do you want to write a movie? You want to be a professional screenwriter. You want to become more skilled at this craft. You want to maybe direct that movie yourself, or you just want to do this as a fun hobby for personal enjoyment. But keep in mind this idea that I hear sometimes of, I want to write a movie to get it made, is sort of like saying, I want to play in just one NBA game, in that the skills that you need to get to the point where you could actually do that, you have to play in so many games in order to get to that point that it's a little like confusing and strange to say, I just want to write one movie, then have it get made, and that's it. Like, that just doesn't really happen. It's going to take a long time. This is a long road to build the skills necessary to do this. Remember that a bricklayer making a road does not care particularly whether any individual brick is a masterpiece. They have a road to build, and therefore they are already on to the next one by the time, like, in the time that it takes to assess, oh, was that brick good? I don't know, I could have done better there, I could have done better there. They're already on to the next brick, and that is how you get a road done. So, idea to first draft in 8 weeks. Here's the process. Logline always comes first. That's the one-sentence expression of the idea of your movie. And there's certain things that we're looking for in the logline that we want to make sure are, questions that are being answered. It doesn't always have to follow our super specific template, but if it doesn't, then there are questions that you want to just make sure that you're answering in other ways. We move from the logline onto the sketchbook, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's an unsorted kind of collage of all the ideas that you have for this script. Ideas, pictures, lines of dialogue, ideas for characters or scenes. There's nothing wrong to include in there, and you're going to have at least a full week to fill that up with all your inspiration and things that get your mind racing. And also just nailing down what you know happens where. You don't have to know too much about the story yet. But from there we move on to the story beats summary, what I often just call the summary, and that's going to be a list of the major events in your script with the headings for structural reasons. So we have the intro, we have the break into Act 2, the break into Act 3, we have the midpoint. We have all these things that we're looking for just in terms of screen structure in general. We move from there to scene cards, which I mentioned are going to be full paragraph for each scene in the script, nailing down what happens on every single page before you begin. And then finally, step 5 is we go to pages. That's a term that's used in the industry as well, so learn that and burn that into your brain. Go to pages means you actually move from outlining and pre-writing into the step of formatting and proper, your final draft or your writer duet or whatever program you're using. Okay, so we have just a couple little interesting quotes on here about structure. We don't have to look at these too thoroughly at the moment just because we have, again, so much else to do, and we want to make sure we have time to look at our student lines. But just remember, Coen brothers say, if the writer doesn't know where the story is going, the audience can't possibly know. Obviously, sometimes we don't want the audience to know where the story is going, but they should feel like you do, like the writer does. It's not just random stuff occurring. What is structure, though? I mean, we can ask this question it's the organization of events in a narrative that includes the order in which they occur and also how they relate to one another. Without structure, a story is just a list of occurrences. You know how I'm sure you have people in your life that are that you hear tell anecdotes or tell stories, or maybe you have this is the kind of thing that becomes really apparent when someone does not have these skills, I will say. So maybe you have some aunt or something who's always like trying to tell you a story about, I went to the mall today and some interesting thing happened, but they go on like a really long tangent at the beginning about finding the parking, and then like they get distracted by talking about parking at some other restaurant that they had a bad experience with some time, and then like they get distracted and just go off on all these tangents, and it's like that's a story without much structure. You can have a story, or if you have too little structure, then it's not even a story at all. Here's just two events. This morning I ate a bowl of cereal and a little boy in Algeria flew a kite. That's not a sequence of events. That's just two separate things occurring. So a story has to be one thing happens, so then the other thing happens, so then finally the finale happens, and then we resolve that in some way. So a story is things that kind of lead into one another that then lead to some kind of resolution, or end up with us having felt like there was some kind of point to that. So remember, structure is what turns and then into this idea of so then. And all this exists as mostly your friend, not your enemy. And a lot of writers are kind of people that want to buck the trends or fight the system or stick it to the man or whatever. But don't battle this too much until you know what the norms and the expectations are and how a script should kind of feel, I guess makes sense to me. So just by reading and writing a lot of these, you will get you will start to burn into your mind how these things are kind of feeling, and you should be able to gain the ability to tell when something just doesn't quite feel right in a script. Like you aren't, even if you aren't 100% sure what it is, you will get eventually from doing this enough the skills to be able to say something's wrong in the midpoint, or the pacing feels off, or something like that. So you should just start to increase your analytical abilities the more you read and write. Structure is not some set of manacles slapped on by the man to turn your movie into Hollywood trash. It's here to help you. And if nothing else, by following this, what might at first glance seem like somewhat restrictive structural templates and things like that, remember that, again, after a draft is done, you can change this up as much as you want, and after you're done with the course, you can change the methods as much as you want. Take what works and don't use the stuff that doesn't, and if you can come up with something better, then of course you must use that. By the time you're done with multiple rewrites, though, remember that these page number benchmarks and all these things are going to be shifted around so much that it won't feel as formulaic as you might be worrying about. You're not locked into the structure of your outline. A movie does evolve somewhat organically as you are writing it, and it's like, it's a train that is being built as it is in motion, as we sort of say. So you don't have to have every single thing nailed down. We try to. That's the ideal of a script, and the scene cards represent the sort of, platonic ideal of the story. But you have to discover some things just by writing the movie, so you don't want to over-prepare or spend months and months and months getting ready to write a script and then just never starting, because, again, we need to be writing these in 8 to 12 weeks for the most part. Read lots of scripts is the number one thing that I can tell you. Professional scripts off of Blacklist are the best way to approach this. Let's see if we have any questions or comments so far. I actually can't quite read this chat. It's so small. Is there a way we can blow this up, Nacho?
Everything that anyone types gets recreated here in this bootcamp chat channel.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, so it's all, whatever anyone types on any platform, it gets forwarded to all the other platforms.
I had no idea. That's awesome. Cool. All right, so questions from anyone. Feel free to type or unmute and ask over voice. All right, I'm not seeing any questions so far, so we're going to just blaze forward. You got to really read lots of scripts. That's my number one point. Okay, what about art house, foreign scripts, things like this where they don't seem to follow any discernible structure, or it's some different structure? I get it, I understand. The fact that other structures or films without a structure that is immediately clear to you exist, though, doesn't mean that readers will be in tune with what you're trying to do. So just for the most part, keep in mind that your shenanigans will be interpreted as ignorance if you go way off the beaten path when it comes to structure and you're like, I want to do a movie with just 2 acts. or I want to do a movie that's all one long act, or anything like this. It's like, you can try these things on your own and you can see how effective they are, but readers often just won't know what you're doing, and they will just think that you're being weird and wacky, and they won't like it. So that's not to say that you are being limited in some way by 3-act structure, but keep in mind that if you only have ideas that can't possibly in any way fit into 3 acts, then writing professional features in America just may not be for you. But you can get away with some really weird and experimental stuff in 3-act movies, I absolutely promise you. So, story structure essentials. I think we've all sort of seen diagrams like this before. This is not a picture that I've made, and we've seen a million things like this, but the basic progression of a story is going to be beginning, middle, and end, which we can call acts 1, 2, and 3. Act 1 is going to be the introduction, where we come to meet your protagonist in the world that they live in until some kind of catalyst or event that shakes up that world occurs, at which point a doorway is going to sort of be unveiled to them, a threshold, you could say, in hero's journey terms. So they quickly realize that threshold, that doorway, is locked with some various scary-looking locks that have traps and poison needles and arrows and things that shoot out of them. And these are just representing the various hazards that come with going through that doorway, but your character is going to sort of try them out in a section that we call trying the locks, which in some structures is called like the debate section, but I like to phrase it a little more actively because we want to make sure your character is remaining active and not just sitting around wondering or thinking about, should I go on this journey? They are, in fact, taking the first, perhaps probing the first few steps onto it. They're trying the various locks on this door and realizing, oh no, this is going to be a substantially difficult journey in front of me. Movies typically aren't about small journeys, easy questions, or like unsubstantial life changes. So remember, we want to, for the genre it's in, keep those stakes and keep that urgency as high as we can, as high as is appropriate, I will say. So once the once the motivation or the desire of your main character overcomes their fear of change in whatever way, they're going to step through that sort of doorway into the upside-down, topsy-turvy world of Act 2, which is going to be the meat of the movie. We say Act 2 is the movie. So whatever you've promised in the poster and the trailer or just the title, those initial promises of your genre and whatever ones you've made specifically for this project are going to be realized here, and we're going to see those scenes that we have kind of been waiting for, and this is like the trailer moments. All the fun and games, as it's called in some structures of your story, go here, and we want to realize your premise to the highest extent that we can, and want to make sure that you're playing all the sort of games with the premise that you set up that would seem to be available to you. We're going to be building towards the midpoint, which is the exact center of the story that often represents some kind of reversal or a large elevation in stakes. We're building towards this all is lost moment in which it seems like your character has either failed at their goal or is on the verge of failing at their goal. The sort of pit of despair is what comes to follow, where your character, this is the why have you forsaken me kind of moment, where it seems that they have been utterly beaten or are on the verge of being utterly beaten, until the break into Act 3 is often going to be when your character realizes the truth of the thing that they've been trying to avoid learning the entire time, and they might re-encounter some old ally, or they might essentially come to realize the truth of the theme of the story, and they're going to take one last swing at the villains in your finale that is going to be, completed by them either winning or losing. And then we have a little bit of time for an epilogue, though remember in feature films we don't have a lot of time for this, and your quote epilogue is like just probably 5 pages-ish or so. It's hard to keep that energy up after the climax of the story has happened, so we want to be wrapping things up pretty soon after the climax. What's an act? We have I think a lot of us kind of know, acts are going to represent the different phases or sections of the story in which different sorts of things are going to be happening, but essentially Act 1 is set up, Act 2 is the confrontation, Act 3 is going to be the resolution and tying everything together. So Act 1 is, we have our inciting incident early on, or the catalyst, which is going to be the thing that sets your story into motion. If we look at the narrative as, a series of dominoes, this is the first domino that is tilted over into the next one, so then the next one falls over, so then the next one falls over. What is here on this picture called plot point 1 is our act break. In screenwriting, we don't call them plot points. That's sort of a novel thing. We call them act breaks every time. So we break into Act 2. In our confrontation, that's sort of the meat of the movie that we're working up to the midpoint. Our last act break brings us into Act 3. We ramp up to the climax, and then we conclude. There's a couple other story type diagrams here. These are drawn by Kurt Vonnegut for a lecture he did once that show you stuff that's not exactly what we're talking about, and I just include these to show some sort of counter examples where, look at the Kafka story, for instance, that hardly fits into a 3-act ramp sort of, roller coaster image diagram. So these other things do sort of exist, and you should realize that, not everyone's writing Hollywood movies, or at least not everyone is writing feature films, so some certain structures might work better in different parts of the world as well. So this is called Kisho Tenketsu, which is, I think, not that dissimilar from what we consider to be Western style storytelling. That sure looks like a roller coaster, doesn't it? It's even got a little loop in it. These things have various names and various forms all over the world, but ultimately we're trying to kind of boil down what people like to see in a story into one. You could say it's homogenized, but really it's just been worn smooth like a stone in a river. This idea of the 3-act structure, the elevation, the Freytag's pyramid of building up, or like ramping up in intensity and increasing the challenge that your characters are facing until we hit the most difficult portion of all, and then they either win or they lose, and we sort of learn something from that. Here's the hero's journey, which is often represented as a big circle. That includes your character going on this call to adventure. A lot of this is like, we have all these elements here. Call to adventure is the catalyst, for instance. We have the threshold is going to be your first act break. So we have a lot of these things that are kind of just in what we do with different names. There's the story circle, which some people really like to use. And all of this is kind of just to organize the events of your story in such a way that they are as satisfying as they can be and are sort of falling in such a way that people are used to seeing these events occurring. So lots and lots and lots of different versions of this that you can look at here if you really want to, but this is all kind of coming around to the same sorts of stuff. So here's the structure that I use myself when I am writing features, and keep in mind that I am usually writing horror, thriller, and action films. Those are my sort of genres that I do the most, although I do write every genre, or most of them. I don't really like rom-coms. I have yet to be convinced on rom-coms. Maybe I will change my mind, and I did love Palm Springs, so I'm like, maybe I do like rom-coms. But keep in mind that you may have to increase or account for a longer page length in some genres. If you're doing big historical epics or something like that, then 90 pages might not be appropriate for this. And you have to adjust these numbers to compensate with that. But this is where those general structural beats are going to be falling on my kind of normal timeline. So we start with our intro, our catalyst around page 10. And nowadays readers do look for a catalyst earlier, and tastes and conventions just change over time. You know how long it is before we meet Luke Skywalker in A New Hope? It's like 15 minutes-ish, which would seem out of place in a modern movie, but in the 70s and 80s, longer first acts were just more sort of in vogue, and they were sort of more okay, and for whatever reasons. So nowadays, first acts are much shorter. Catalyst comes earlier, and readers love this sort of big WTF moment at around page 10 to 15 that is going to really pull them into the story. So I'm going to go over what all these things mean more in our various classes. We don't have to focus way too much on structure today, but just as a free intro class, this is a broad overview of the kind of stuff that we're going to be looking at in this course, and the kinds of these story beats or these plot moments that you can look forward to writing in your own story. So, what's an outline? This is a blueprint for structuring the story of your movie that's going to provide an overview of these story beats and these scenes before you start writing the thing in screenplay format, which again we don't do until halfway through this program. There are many different styles and manners and methods of outlining, and there's not one right way to do it. All I can do is sort of show you my way of doing this, which I have kind of written out and made as clear as possible, step by step. This is how you write a movie. By the end, your movie may not be amazing or particularly coherent or good, whatever good means, but it will be a script, and that is what we can sort of guarantee through the class. It's harder than you think for some people to actually wrap their head around what does a script look like on the page and how does it work, and it's not an unremarkable achievement to simply write a full feature film that coheres and makes sense and doesn't have any pages missing or placeholders left in it. It says fade in at the beginning and it says the end at the end. Discussion. Okay, have we outlined scripts before? What's everyone's sort of experience level? Where is everyone kind of falling on this, and what was the process that you've used before? What has worked or not worked? Why do we bother creating outlines or log lines? Let's feel free to weigh in. Go ahead in the chat. What do you guys think? Anyone can feel free to unmute or type in the chat, and we'll call on you. Anybody? I'll call on somebody from the class if we need. Looks like we have some students typing. Go ahead. Looks like we still have students typing. Nacho, do you want to weigh in on how you outlined before starting the course? I know you touched on this a little bit and mentioned that you had always kind of had a basic outline process, but just to get the conversation going, why don't you tell us, like, what had you tried to do before it? What had worked?
Sure, I can get back to, like, the first few scripts that I wrote. The process was, like, just dive in and start typing. So I didn't first couple scripts that I wrote. I think I had some kind of cool life experience. Why didn't I write a movie about this? This was like high school, and I just started typing, and the first felt like, okay, I started some cool scenes to introduce the characters, and everyone's movies, you have at least some subconscious sense of, like, what's exciting or what feels like a good movie moment stuff, right? But I would sort of write myself into like a place where I couldn't get to or something. I would sort of, like, the story would fall apart in Act 2. Later, I learned a lot more about story structure. I used index cards where I would, like, put all the cards up on the wall. That's pretty cool and pretty helpful to see everything. But I wasn't actually figuring out till, like, what is exactly happening until I started working and using your process where we're, like, really writing out every single, like, what's happening. And it's sort of like a treatment in a way, if you were to kind of put all those scene cards together.
Right, yeah. So by the time that you delete the titles off of your scene cards, you might even be able to consider that document kind of a treatment, which, if you don't know, is a sort of deliverable that we do, which is sort of like a prose version of the whole story. It might have some shorthand and things that are unique or specific to just you. So it won't be quite as polished and easy to read for someone else as a treatment would normally be, but you're going to get, like, a pretty comprehensive picture from just writing the scene cards first. And yeah, if you're just opening a blank document and starting to type, you're going to find yourself in a corner very quickly, because you won't quite understand how these things are going to link to things later on, or how you're going to be putting the setups in place that are going to be paid off later. You're just going to be blind in the woods if you are approaching this without any kind of outline at all. We have some other comments in the chat. How to Disappear says, I've used everything under the sun. 8 sequence method, index cards, Truby's 22 plot points in story development, walk and write, etc. Goodness, I've heard of some of those. And yeah, there are many methods out here for doing this, but in general, when you're working in Hollywood, you want to be able to think and write in 3-act structure, of course, which all these things are kind of us trying to help you do. But the more that we split it up into 22 plot points, 8 sequences, like, there's 100 different ways of doing this, and it's, I find, easiest to simply be able to talk in terms of the acts more so than beats or sequences or things like that. As long as we, like, have that foundation of how does 3-act structure work, then you're going to be pretty much okay. Like, I'm sure that there are various ways that any of these things can work. And if one of these methods works better for you, then by all means use that. But you should still be able to talk about, when you're getting into development with other people, you need to still be able to, like, they're not going to be familiar with almost anything except for talking in terms of 3 acts. they're not going to know what 8 sequence format is or 22 plot point sequences or like anything like that. So just make sure that if you're going to be working with other people in Hollywood, that you're using terminology and nomenclature that they themselves are able to follow along with what you're talking about. Thomason says, I've outlined a script. I put the logline and story down, then wrote the events of the story, and made sure to imply how you want the scenes to flow together, then made sure to make each opening and closing shot... Someone's just banging on my wall. Maybe it's the Riverdance crew. Or maybe they're hammering a picture into the wall? I'm not sure. Anyway, then you made sure each opening and closing shot had significance in being a motif for the protagonist's arc. Then you wrote the principal and supporting cast and characters and summarized details that you need for the sake of continuity. Goodness. Okay, so, yes, there's lots of good stuff there, and I'm sure that a lot of that can sort of weave in with the methods that we're teaching and working with here, but good that you have a little bit of background trying and using this before. Morgan says, writing out each classic moment, opening image setup, then plugging in the events until general skeleton is sorted out, then going here into details. Yeah, and that's essentially what we're doing, but just a sort of a very in-depth version of that. We're looking at more than just these kind of classic, these tent poles that are keeping your story up. Obviously, we have the beginning, middle, end, all these things, but we have a little more granular story beats than that to work with. But it seems like you guys have at least tried a little bit or had some experience with different methods of outlining, which is great. Let's talk about loglines, because we're heading into the second hour of our class, meaning that this is going to be the time that we have to go over student loglines and make sure that we're refining these as much as possible before the boot camp begins, because that logline is going to be your entire story distilled down to just a sentence, or possibly 2, but usually just 1. And almost every time that someone has 2 sentences, I say you can do this in 1, so try to do it in 1 sentence. You're going to make sure that this implies some kind of visual action. It's not just going to be a story about people sitting around and thinking about stuff or just talking about stuff, though now and again you have, I don't know, a courtroom drama or something where people talking about stuff can be inherently very dramatic. We want to know, what is the inciting incident? Who is the protagonist? What do they want in their sort of Act 2 goal? What's standing in their way? Or what villain or antagonist is opposing them? And what happens if they fail? We need a stakes or a ticking clock. What is at stake for the journey? What bad thing will occur if they don't go on this quest, or if they don't succeed? And then a ticking clock, potentially, or the walls or scope of the story as well, which are going to be things that tell us, like, what is the time frame that this takes place in? Sometimes that can be super important. What is the physical location that this might all be sort of contained by? And, like, thrillers, that can be really big if it all takes place in just one spot. We want to know the kind of, like, boundaries of this narrative before we get into it. So here's my logline template that I use and that I suggest you use until you have something better or are able to answer these questions in such a way that does not rely on this exact phrasing. But when or after the inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict in order to, or else, the stakes. So try phrasing it in those terms, and you can even now start to kind of use your notepads or whatever to start to, or if you have an idea for your movie, start to try to put it in those terms. Remember, let's go over what these things mean. Inciting incident is the first domino that tips over into the other dominoes, so then the next one falls, so then the next one falls. It's that first event that shakes up your main character's normal world or normal life and invites them into going through this threshold or going through this doorway. The adjective that you're using to describe your protagonist is actually not some throwaway thing. It's super important, and you have to pick your adjective very carefully, because often this is going to be an adjective that describes some trait that is relevant to your main character in terms of this story. So that's going to be something that either is like a trait that they're struggling with or trying to overcome, or something that's holding them back, or it's the thing that they're going to have to, like, ultimately come to learn they should not be like this sometimes, or this can be something that relates them personally to whatever quest or journey they're going on. If it's just like a detective is hired to solve a crime, and then it's like, why is there a movie about this? It's like, do they have some kind of personal history with any members of the victim, or do they have a similar background to someone involved in the crime, so they are uniquely interested in this case? Like, is there anything that brings your main character closer to the events, makes them hit home more, and elevates the level of stakes and urgency for the story? That's what that adjective has to do, which is quite a lot of heavy lifting for just a single word. So don't pick it frivolously. Pick your adjective quite carefully. Conflict. Stories are all about conflict and change, and you need to be able to know what is the thing that the main character has to do in the story, the physical, tangible thing that they need to do. What do I mean by a tangible goal? Somebody help out. Feel free to unmute and speak out loud. What's the difference between a tangible goal and an intangible or internal goal?
A tangible goal is like, say, if, like in movies, like in 2012 or something, like they have to try to figure out how to get to a building or something where they actually can survive the phenomena, like in films like 2012, like I said, and Cloverfield, they have to figure out a way to get to a certain physical location.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, a character goal could be like say a character has PTSD from war. They have to figure out internally how to, reflect and heal from their wounds and not necessarily move on, but just, that's kind of like the difference.
Yeah, exactly. So a tangible goal is going to have what we call a goal post of some kind. You might say just survive is kind of a nebulous goal normally, right? So in a movie like 2012, obviously, it's nice to have some kind of actual place that we need to go, that we understand that once they get there, then they will have succeeded at this goal. A lot of the time, I'll have students, I'll imagine a story like Lord of the Rings. I'll have, imagine a student wrote Lord of the Rings. I'll be like, what's your main character's goal? And they'll be like, well, Frodo has to, become the person that he was always meant to be and inherit the mantle of the hero of his ancestors, and he has to get past. And I'm like, no, what's the tangible goal? He's trying to throw a ring in a volcano, right? He has to, the smallest person in the whole world, you have to go to the other side of the world and throw the thing into the hole. Like, that's the tangible goal. And we understand that the internal goal will be interwoven with that, and that, like, stories have internal and external goals, but the external one is the one that we want to frame the logline around, and the adjective that you choose for your main character is going to be what hints at their internal goal. We can't go way too much into it, and you're going to mostly be just like focus on the tangible and the achievable and things with actual concrete goalposts. Otherwise, we're just going to be sort of lost. Imagine and like I mentioned, a goal like survive can be very tangible, or it can be very intangible. What about in a movie like Evil Dead 2, right? Evil Dead 2, the title gives you a hint, Dead by Dawn. That tells us that the main character's goal is basically just survive in a series of attacks by demons and zombies, right? But when the sun comes up, he's safe, okay? So that actually becomes, that's the difference between guy moves into cabin that is constantly being attacked by demons and zombies, his goal is survive. That's intangible. Until we say he has to survive until dawn. Right? Now it's tangible, because we know he has to just make it through the night, and if he can, then we understand that he's succeeded at his goal. If you've seen the movie, you know that he hasn't really succeeded at it at the end, but whatever. Tangible goals, so important. Physically obtainable, as Joe Toole says, yes. We need to know what needs to happen before this thing is done or this thing has failed. Movies need to be framed around this kind of singular quest, and obviously you can have stuff that branches off of that and have side characters and other arcs too, but when you're expressing a logline, we want to focus on your main character's singular journey with a tangible goalpost. Okay, so you should all be still making notes, and you can be changing and updating your loglines as we are going through this class. We're almost to the part where we're going to be sharing them. So we can post them in the chat, which, again, the chat channel is called Free Bootcamp Class on the left-hand side of your Discord window. If you're watching on one of our streams, I think you can still comment and would be able to see it. Let's see if we have any questions first, though. Question from Joe Toole. Can I talk about techniques to add stakes to a movie? Yeah, so you need to find things that your character cares about that are in some kind of jeopardy. So the thing might not... the solution is not always to add bigger stakes. Those things, like small things, can become big stakes if your character cares about them more. So, if you have a story about a guy who's trying to become the boss of a company, and he's already rich, and he already has like a bunch of fallback options, and if he fails at this, he doesn't even care that much. He's like, oh, I'll get another job. Then the stakes are very low. But if this is somebody who's defined by how much they love their job and care about their job and would die for their job and like are obsessed with becoming the best, suddenly the stakes are very high. So find a thing that your character, it doesn't have to be huge, but find a thing to make your character care about more, and stakes are easy to find. Does that make sense, Joe Toole? Thomason asks, quick question, how do we know the difference between a good logline and a bad one? That's a fair question. I would say this whole class is sort of about that. I mean, there's like dozens of things that we sort of look at, and if we're looking at this template that we have here, consider that these are the major questions that need to be answered with a logline. So, how do we know a good logline? Well, it tells me what was the inciting incident that set this in motion. What is the main character struggling against, and what is their kind of implied internal journey? What is the conflict, and what are we actually physically, tangibly going to be doing in the story? What are we watching people do is a really, you'd think that wouldn't be a frequent question, but I ask this question all the time. Wait, what are we actually watching people do? And finally, we want to know the scope of the story and kind of the like time frame or the location that it takes place in. If these things are important, is this going to take place all over the course of one school year, or is this going to take place all over the course of one night? And do we understand what the stakes are? What is important to the character? What jeopardy is the thing that they care about in? What will happen if they fail? Like, I know that's like 10 different things that we look at, but if these questions, like, bad loglines become clear very quickly because they don't answer these questions or they answer them in unsatisfactory ways. Joe Toole says, try to make more personal to the character. Can I give more examples? Sure. Have you guys seen the movie Whiplash? Whiplash is about a drummer in college who wants to be the best, right? He wants to join the, yes, with Miles Teller, Thomason. He wants to join the orchestra of this really, really, really intense drumming teacher, or this really intense music instructor, I guess, or conductor of this orchestra, the most elite orchestra at his elite school. And he cares about this more than anything else in the world, as we come to realize in the course of the movie. He literally breaks up with his girlfriend because he's like, no, sorry, I'm just going to be thinking about drumming too much. I don't think we can be together. So, like, we see how much he gives up to do this and how much he struggles with this and strives for this and how hard he's trying for this. What are the actual stakes? What happens if he doesn't become the best drummer in the world or join this orchestra? Kind of, like, in reality, kind of nothing. But to that character, he will be devastated because he's poured everything into this, and it's his whole world. So does that make kind of sense to how we can find something to just make your character care about more, make it more personal to them? They can have poured more energy and time and effort into it. They can have been trying to do it for their entire life, potentially. It's something that they aspire to and dream about, and like we have these things ourselves. You need to kind of maybe look inside and say, what do I really care about? If other people might say that and be like, if he doesn't get in the orchestra, he's still at an elite school. But you guys watch sports movies, or anybody who watches sports, you realize that if they lose the game, they still get paid, right? But the players care a lot about winning, and that's how we can sort of get engaged, is like we're watching people try really, really, really hard to do these things. The stakes are kind of like, if they don't win, they don't get as many promotions or as many prizes, or their name doesn't go on TV or whatever. But like, it matters to those people, and so just find things that people care about more. Thomason says, I don't care about drumming, but the film made me care for the drummer who cared. Yes, exactly, because just by seeing how much someone wants something, regardless of what it is, and like Joe Toole says, showing what the character is willing to sacrifice in pursuit of that goal, so helpful. Because by watching what people cut away or leave out, or like what people don't pursue, or what they choose to not do instead of their goal, that tells us what matters to them a lot. Looks like we have a question from Two Crows, who sent it to me on Discord, and says, I'm stuck on a logline for a horror anthology. There are 5 short stories, but there's no main character. Okay, so we'll have the, so to answer your question, Two Crows, we're about to share loglines, so feel free to just post this logline or whatever you have for it, and we'll be able to dive into this and help you sort this out. Just give us, when we get to the logline part, just give us whatever you've got. Or you can just say, Untitled Horror Anthology, then when we call on you, you can explain a little more if you want to. All right, let's look at the sketchbook really quick. So be working on your loglines, and get ready to share them. We weren't sharing them quite yet, so let me just go through a couple more slides. But the last part of class will be working with you on these loglines, and I'm going to call on you, so you should be prepared to unmute and to explain and answer questions and take feedback. Please take the feedback well. Remember that you're in a class, first of all, but second of all, screenwriting is so collaborative, and you will be getting feedback from people at every single stage. You like becoming the person who is really good and graceful at receiving notes and not arguing or fighting back or saying, that's dumb, you're wrong, I have this, it's perfect. Like, if it's perfect, you don't need to bring it to a class. So in addition to building skills related to actually writing and executing 100-page long narratives, something we emphasize a lot in Script Camp is you're building skills to give and receive feedback. And receiving feedback might not sound like a skill. You just sit there and listen and answer questions, but it's absolutely a skill. And people who are good at this stand out right away. Be polite, be courteous, say, even if you don't agree with something, say, thanks, I'll think about that. I'll see how I can incorporate that. Like, that's a huge part of being a screenwriter, is taking notes that you don't necessarily agree with and stewing on them and saying, how can I find ways to make that work? And ultimately, you don't have to take every note. I'm not going to go to your house and burn your story and say you have to do it like this. I'm trying to do this to help you and to get you used to receiving developmental level notes at early stages, which is just a massive part of the bread and butter of this job. Okay, what's a sketchbook? You can start this now if you want. There's no right or terribly wrong way to do this, but this is a place to collect your notes and sketches and ideas as you develop a story, flesh out your characters and possible themes, or maybe even dramatic arguments, and you're going to come up with these Act 2 scenes and set pieces that you might be able to imagine for the trailer. You might be able to imagine lines of dialogue, or kind of just characters that you know will show up at some point, even if you don't know what they are going to do exactly yet. And you're going to brainstorm possible endings or research. If you are writing a script set in a different community or country or about a person who's very different from you, you're going to want to do the interviews or watch the videos or take whatever important notes that you need to just make sure that you're getting the specifics of your storytelling right. So give me just 1 second here as we go into the sketchbook phase. You can go into your Google Docs, and so most people have either a YouTube or Gmail account, so you can you have this already, but go into Google Drive or Google Docs and make a new document, name it the title of your script, sketchbook. If you don't have a title, it's okay. And at the top, you're going to try to be adding your title, genre, logline, and what we call comps. Comps are comparisons. Those are other movies that are sort of like yours. You're limited to 2 of these. Don't give us like 100 comps. You want to try to find a way you can think of comps is it's like the world of the first thing with the tone or style of the second thing. So if it's Back to the Future meets, this is where you fall into these cliches of Die Hard compared, like every action movie was Die Hard meets something for a while, but you can see why that was in place. It was like, oh, it's going to be one character versus a bunch of bad guys as they navigate around an arena of some kind that they are sort of trapped in. So in the 90s, everything was Die Hard on a cruise ship, or Die Hard on a bus was Speed, wasn't it? Die Hard on an airplane was Air Force One, sort of. So like everything kind of related to that. So there are certain things that are over-comped or that are over-compared, but don't worry too much about that now. Just try to find 2 movies that sort of describe the tone and the style of what you're going for, or the general kind of action of what we'll be seeing. KJ Studio says, I'm finding it difficult to summarize my story into a few sentences. That's okay. That's what this camp is all about, helping you do that. So try to boil it down to just 1. If you can't and you need to give us 2 or 3 just for this class today, then you can. But I'm going to be helping you try to get it down to just 1. Remember, we don't need to go through all the way to the end, though. We're not trying to summarize the entire story. We're trying to say, this person is trying to do this thing and this is in their way. And if you can't summarize that in 1 sentence, then your story is just too complicated, because that's a pretty simple 3 basic things. Protagonist, obstacle, goal. Just think of those, and if you have nothing else, just give us those. Okay, so start posting your loglines now in the chat, and if you're trying to choose between multiple, or maybe you don't quite know what to do, then just give us whatever you've got, and we will help you as best we can for the next 45 minutes. So this is a good opportunity to nail down the basics of your story before we move into the next phases of the program. So give us the loglines. I'll give you guys like a minute or 2 to post these. I'll also take questions if people have them in the chat. So loglines or questions, go for it. Looks like we found one posted by Thomason. Thank you, Thomason. I'm going to wait until we get just a few more before we dive into some of these. Don't be shy, guys. This is a good time to learn what's working or what's not working about what you have, or maybe to kind of help focus and figure out how to express your idea better. Thank you, KJ. Let's get one more, and then we'll dive in. And we got one from How to Disappear. Thanks, guys. All right, I'm going to... The Riverdance crew is back at their normal jumping up and down. So I'm going to call on you guys in the order that we posted these here so that we can answer questions about these. Again, remember, screenwriting is very social. If you can't talk on a microphone, you're not going to be able to nail a general meeting or a development call or anything like that. So get used to this. It's okay if you're kind of shy or any of these things. Many of us are writers, so we are those things. But being good in a room refers to the idea that you are engaged and energetic and active and collaborative and all these kind of social things that we're looking for too. So just get used to the idea of talking about your ideas and talking through your stories a lot. Okay. You guys ready to start? Let's begin with Thomason. So Thomason, go ahead and read this out for us.
Read my logline, right?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay. So I had, when a cult from her past stalks her, a traumatized woman must face them before they destroy her life.
All right. Nice work. Not bad. We've got some good stuff here. I will say there's some more specificity that we can get from this that we would probably want to be looking for. Maybe I think I see what your inciting incident is, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be this woman has, like, there's an incident where this cult from her past shows up, and that's the kind of thing that kicks her story into motion. She re-encounters somebody from this, along the lines of a movie like The Lodge or something like that. A traumatized woman is a nice way of telling us something that the character is going to be sort of struggling with. It's not terribly specific, but we understand generally that what she's going to be kind of overcoming this trauma through this conflict with this cult. Is there any more specific we can be in how we're describing this cult or what their intentions are? Like, what are your villains trying to actually do?
Well, okay, so I do know, like, that they're satanic in, like, nature.
Okay.
Like, I've always imagined them to be, they're kind of a metaphor for her personal trauma, because at the beginning of the film, actually, there's a couple scenes that have kind of evolved, and basically, it's like her parents and brother her parents are murdered, but her brother nearly dies. So, all I know about the cult is that they're satanic, and that they're connected to her family's past, and the way that it affects her haunts her to the present, and she's trying to, like, come to terms with it. And throughout the film, you know, they're back in her life, so it's kind of just a metaphor for her trauma and how she overcomes it, how she learns to kind of deal with it, you know?
Okay, these are good things to know, but we don't want to talk too much in terms of metaphors and themes right now. We want to talk just in terms of the concrete. What is the cult trying to actually do? Are they trying to kill her?
It's kind of, I'm sorry, it's so complicated, but basically they're either trying to do one of two things. They're trying to kill her, or they want something from her, like they want the devil to impregnate her, kind of like Rosemary's Baby.
They want either of those two things, and they don't care which one. Why? What's the more urgent of their two goals?
Probably the satanic child.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
It's complicated.
If their goals are so complicated that they can't be summed up in one sentence, then their goals are too complicated. Does that make sense? Like we don't need to start listing all their fallback plans. We just want to know what they're trying to do. What do they actually want?
Yeah, they're trying to just get the child then.
Okay. So before they impregnate her with a demon baby or whatever is sort of your real kind of stakes here, is there sort of a main villain that represents this cult? Like a leader of them, for instance, something like that?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be worthy of mentioning in the logline, especially if your main character has some kind of connection to them. We're lacking that kind of personal connection. I understand you're saying it's a cult from her past, but we don't really know what that means in terms of your character. Does that make sense? So, like, if it's led by her father, that's a hugely different story than if it's led by, her best friend. Does that make sense? How you need to bring this home to your character more and be more specific in order to make us care more.
Gotcha. I guess, like, because I heard, like, of the, development process and stuff, I'm just thinking about, like, I guess because I also have experience writing stories and, like, I know, like, publishing industries and all that. I just know that it's good marketing, I guess, for people to not know everything. So I don't know how much I can be spoilery, if that makes sense.
There's no spoilers in loglines. That's not a thing. There's no holding back. The more you hold back, the less interested we'll often be. You only have one sentence. So imagine you're sending this to somebody who gets 100 loglines a day and can only read 3 of them, right? So they're not going to care if you give a spoiler in the logline. They need something that grabs them and says, "Oh, I have to read that." And the more vague you are, the less they're going to want to be. The less they're going to want to do that. So I understand some people are like, you don't need to give away the ending. You don't even need to know the ending right now. But you need to give us something that makes, if you're a consumer of movies like this, I imagine, right? This is like a thriller, right? Or a supernatural thriller?
Yeah, it's like a horror thriller, psychological thing.
If you were scrolling through streaming channels and that was all you saw, would you be like, "Oh, I have to see that one"?
Yeah.
Right. So this is what, like, we're looking for, that specificity. And the more specific and interesting you can be, also think of suggesting, like, I don't quite understand the time frame or the scope of the story at all. She has to face them before they destroy her life. This is sort of like those loglines that say, like, when she's attacked by a shark, a woman must fight the shark or be killed by the shark. You see what I mean? Where it's like,
yeah,
there's a cult. They're bad. Our main character has to face them. It's not super tangible, but I kind of get what you mean. Does she have to kill the leader? I don't quite know. You may not have to outline that, but consider telling us, like, are they attacking and stalking her at her ranch in Texas, and she has to survive a night of torment from this baby cult? Or is she, like, on a plane to San Francisco? Like, what are the actual walls and boundaries of the story? Think in terms of time frame or location.
Okay.
Okay.
I
so
definitely have that in mind.
You'd have that in mind. Great. Okay. So yeah, if by the end of class you can submit a revised version, I can give you feedback on that too. But hopefully that kind of get your gears turning and thinking, like, how can I spice this up? Because, like, this is a functional logline, and that's great that you've, like, arranged this in, like, this makes sense, and I can see the basic pieces and questions being answered. But now we're like, this is a soup with no flavor. So we need the spice now. Add some nice spice.
Completely makes sense, and I really appreciate your feedback.
Sure. Feel free to rewrite, and we'll look at it again by the end of class if you want. I cannot stop fidgeting with this action figure now that I've got this. I have a little from 1997 TIE pilot with gun that I just used to threaten myself into doing good work. I just keep him with pointing the gun at me in my seat. I recommend it. All right, let's look at our next logline. Oh, thank you, Thomas, and yeah, feel free to revise and post again. Let's go down to How to Disappear. We have a splatter horror called Slaughter. And I write a lot of horror is my main thing, so you guys, all your horror people, are in good company here. Go ahead and read this out for us.
Okay, can you hear me, Connor?
I hear you.
Okay, my name's Steve, by the way.
Hi, Steve.
Okay, so here we go. When a black sheep son enlists the help of militant animal rights activists to take over his callous father's slaughterhouse operation, their targets experience the terror of being led to slaughter. And I don't like this logline, but I'm open to obviously any feedback.
It's not as bad as you think it is. There's some interesting stuff here. I like the character relationship dynamics that you've hinted at. I like how you've described him as a black sheep who is like helping the animal rights activists, and so that's funny.
Right. It ties into the movie or the story as well, as
Great.
far as like they. Well, never mind. Go ahead.
No, you're good. So the thing is, though, you've given us the catalyst for a catalyst. He enlists the help of a militant animal rights activist to take over his Cal's father's slaughterhouse. Is him enlisting these people's help what kicks this story in motion, or is it like a? Go ahead.
Yes, you know what? I recognize that as a flaw in the. So that's not the. You mean is that the inciting incident?
Yeah, think of what's the inciting incident. Is it them showing up at this place, or go ahead?
Yeah, I realize that's off as far as like what I have for the story structure. So I knew that was a flaw. So I think the inciting incident is, and I just don't know how to write this into the logline because it's. I don't know. I just couldn't figure out a simplified way to write it. So once they take over the slaughterhouse, I envision is at the, like the beginning of Act 2 or end of Act 1. Okay. So that's where it would come in the story. So the incited incident is basically where, I don't know how much, okay, I'll just say his son works at the slaughterhouse, but in the cooler. So he's kind of away from it. He's kind of forced to be in this. His father's really domineering. And at one point, his father basically, he wants him to like be part of the business, take over his father's dying. The son doesn't want to. So he sort of like, I don't know what you would say, tricks him onto the killing floor and has him like, wants him to basically, kill an animal with a bolt gun.
Okay.
The son refuses, and basically the father's right-hand man, the guy who, runs the operation, ends up doing it in front of him anyway. So it's like a moment of weakness for this character. It really basically humiliates the character, pisses him off. It was kind of the final straw. So we'll say I think that's the incited incident that I have.
Okay, it could be.
Yeah.
Let me ask, who's the hero of the story? The son or the father?
No, it's going to be the son, but the way this is written, it's not really like a typical protagonist. I think it's maybe like what you would call, like, I guess, an anti-hero, or there is no like.
Well, sure. I don't mean hero in terms of morality. I mean, who's the protagonist that we're following?
Yeah, protagonist is the son.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. So, a couple other questions. Your final clause is very kind of passive, and it's like people having things happen to them. Their targets experience the terror of being led to slaughter, and it's not phrased in terms of your character has the tangible goal that they are working towards. So try to find, and usually the way these goes are, and he must now blank in order to or before blank, right? It just sounds like a torture porn movie if you're like, and then they get tortured.
Right, and so here's two questions I want to ask you. Number one, I've considered like it, as I wrote, the genre, the subgenre will depend on how this is written. I have one idea where it's basically psychological, more of like a psychological horror, where people are subjected to like basically methods and the ways in which the animals are killed, but they're not really ever killed, and you don't really see the killing. The other one would be more graphic, which I don't know. It seems like over the top as far as like blood and gore and all that. So that's one part of it. The other part of it I wanted to say is that as this ties into the logline, the initial intention of taking it over is to just exact psychological torture. Sorry, and then like basically through like escalation of tension, someone's accidentally killed, and then that spins the story, escalates the tension further, basically. So I wasn't.
But who's killing who?
Guess,
I'm confused. Who is killing whom?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, one of the activists accidentally kills somebody at some point, which escalates the tension.
That sounds like your inciting incident to me. Or that may not be like page 10 of your movie, but that sounds like a place to start the logline. I'm also struggling to see exactly what you mean by take over. When I first read this, I thought you meant like hostile takeover in a business sense, but you mean actually
no, like they actually take over. Basically, yes.
So it's like an invasion more than a.
It's an invasion, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they also like, this is not really necessary to know, I guess, but they are all wearing different like animal masks, so their identities are anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So once like someone's killed, that to me was more of like, I guess the way I've structured it is more of the midpoint.
Oh, it's the midpoint. Okay, fair enough. Okay, that might not be the inciting incident here, but in any case.
So.
So try to phrase this in terms that we understand that they are, in fact, physically showing up and invading this place. I want to know what their goal is, though, exactly, and what is your main character trying to do?
Yeah, I think basically the way I have the motivation of the main character is basically he's been under the thumb of his father, so his entire life he's about, I think this character's 17, something like that, 16, 17. The goal is basically just to like revenge on his father and the way he's basically abused him, and the animals are sort of like, I know we don't want to talk about themes and metaphors, but in a way are a metaphor for the oppression that the father has exacted.
Sure.
So part of what's not in this logline is the different methods he tries to take. Like he tries to talk to the USDA inspector. That doesn't work. He tries different avenues, and no one really listens because this is like a huge industry. The bottom line is no one really cares. It's capitalism.
Cares about what? Cares that they're killing animals at a slaughterhouse?
Yeah. No one really. Yeah, and just what's going on there. It's not just the killing, but it's like the abuses and all that kind of stuff that's happening.
Oh, it's an abusive. It's not just a regular slaughterhouse. It's a particularly terrible one, is what you're saying.
Yeah, which tends to be which more or less, I guess, I don't know. Seems more common than not at these. But yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, yeah, and I like the connection between the characters. I like the relationship with the father and the son. I'm still looking for a tangible goal for your main character though, because right now your hero shows up with this gang of animal activists to the slaughterhouse, right?
Yeah.
They take it over and tie everyone up or whatever. Then what's the movie? What are we doing there? Now they're like, we need to kill our captives one by one on camera or something, or like, what are they doing?
Well,
exactly?
At this point, they're not killing them, but they're subjecting them to different devices that animals would be used. Like for example, like pigs would be put in like a cage, basically dropped into gas. They're simulating. They're not actually going to gas the people, but they're putting the people through that. Torture, for example.
Sure.
Bloodletting, all these different things.
Okay.
That would be like the first half of the second act. The midpoint is when someone's actually killed, and then the father's right-hand man, I'm just calling him right now, he ends up escaping, so then there's basically a battle between, I don't know if you would say battle, but
No, I'm with you. So
yeah.
The father and son will go head to head as the dad just tries to kind of escape.
Yes, although the dad ends up getting tied up and they, subject him to his own basically thing. The son, I don't know how much to tell you. So basically the son thinks he's anonymous, but there's a telltale basically sign that the father does know it's him. There's also I haven't even mentioned the mother who comes into play in this.
I'd probably leave her out of the logline.
Yeah, I'm not going to add her into the logline. I was just yeah, exactly. So then it just leads up to basically, and maybe this is kind of an issue, like what you were talking, because the main conflict initially was between, the son and the father. The climax, the way I have it structured, is more like the son and the father's right-hand man. The father is tied up but disappears, basically.
Okay.
At the hands of the mother.
Gotcha.
And so then part of the climax is trying to get away with it.
Okay.
At this point. So.
Cool. All right. So hopefully this has given you some things to start to reshape this a little bit. Remember, frame this in terms of what tangible goalpost is your main character trying to do. I understand getting revenge might sound kind of tangible, but it doesn't really have a goalpost, does it?
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
Right. So try to find something that's to me, and again, I'm kind of coming back to when his takeover of his, when his invasion of his, abusive father's slaughterhouse turns ugly. Your main character now must struggle to keep his captives from escaping, and which escalates into a bloodbath. Something like that is what I'm kind of thinking. And I know that may not be the exact structure of it, but just think if it was more sort of like Green. Did you see Green Room?
I have not seen that yet. No.
Definitely. You like
splatter
movies?
I have seen that. I have seen Green Room. Yes.
Oh, isn't it good?
Yes. I do like. Yes. Yeah. I was thinking of Green Book. Sorry. Yes.
Oh no, not that one. No, Green Room is sort of.
Green Room I have seen. Yes.
Yeah, it's like a horror. It's a horror movie. So, or it's like a horror thriller, splatter kind of movie. So the idea is the villains are trying to stop the characters from escaping, so that the character's goalpost is I need to get out of the club that they're, whatever music venue that they're in. So we have in the terms of your movie, your main character is kind of like the quote villain of the situation, meaning that they don't really have a super tangible goalpost, and right now it feels like their job is kind of easy in the logline, and it just feels like, so he shows up and he tortures these people, and why are we rooting for this guy? And like, I understand we want to take down the animal abusers or whatever, but it's just not going to be that exciting to watch a character who, especially in a horror thriller movie, a character who constantly has the upper hand in the situation, which is why in the logline I was trying to guide you towards, like, the inciting incident is when your character loses the upper hand of the situation and now must struggle to do this tangible thing, or else this bad thing will happen. So maybe try to like reshape it along those lines.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Questions?
Appreciate it. No, it's just there's a ton to think about, so I'll hold any questions for now. But yeah, I'm definitely writing down your suggestions and see how we can rework this. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. Let's go down to KJ Studios with Cairo.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead and read this out for us.
A boy who grew up in a tribe has always dreamed of meeting his father, who he soon discovers is from a foreign land. He embarks on a journey to find his father, and when he finally does, he must then adjust from his life on the island to a life in the modern world with a different society and technology.
Okay, thanks for this. So you've listed the genre as adventure. Is the majority of this movie his journey, or is the majority of this movie him trying to adjust to life in the modern world?
The journey isn't a very, significant part, to be honest. It's more about adjusting to the modern life.
Doesn't this sound more like a drama than an adventure then in that case?
I guess so. I thought adventure was just discovering.
Well, adventure will be stories that are based on danger and difficult quests and physical feats. Movies like Pirates of the Caribbean or Indiana Jones or more realistic stories too can be adventure. If we look at anytime a character has to go on a big journey somewhere that is full of obstacles and antagonists and danger and big stakes, if you're saying that journey is not a significant part of the movie, let me ask you, at what point does he actually arrive, do you think, in the new sort of world? Is that halfway through, or is it less?
Probably less.
Less. Okay.
Yeah.
So him arriving there is not even the midpoint. I'm struggling to see structurally exactly what this is, but to me so far it sounds a little more like a drama about a guy trying to, or a kid, maybe you're saying he's... when you say a boy, you mean he's a child? Like, how young a child are we talking?
15.
15. Okay, so you see how when you say a boy, people might think you mean 6 years old, or maybe 10 years old, or maybe 15 years old, and it's a vastly different story depending on their actual age. So I think you want to say a teenager, not a boy.
Okay.
Right. So a teenager grew up in a tribe, has always dreamed of meeting his father, whom he soon discovers is from a foreign land. So what's the actual incident that kicks off this story? Is it him learning that his father lives in, Australia or whatever, and he's on a faraway island?
So I was thinking that, the story would start with, a flashback of, how the father, got onto the island, which was, and then, it would be, 15 years later when the son is all grown up. And then he starts, asking questions about his father.
Sure. So, but what would you say is the event that kicks the story into motion? Is it him learning where his dad is, and now he's like, oh, I need to leave my home because that one event happened?
Him learning about his father, and his, mother, telling him some information about his father kind of kicks off his, impulsiveness to, go and find his father.
Okay, and so I think is he actually meeting up with and living with the dad when he arrives in the modern world too?
It's actually quite easy for him to find his father because his father is famous.
Oh.
So it's he finds it easy to find his father in the end, and then because the press gets a hold of the fact that the father has a son, his father has to accept him and so he starts living with his father for a period of time.
Okay, so what is he famous for?
So basically when the father was on the island, it was because his ship was wrecked in a storm, and he ended up spending 4 years on the island, and basically I like there is like a supernatural touch to my story where like the tribe worships these like crystals which have supernatural healing properties, and so basically the father ends up stealing one of the crystals and then returning back to like America where he like lived before. And so he got famous because he was presumed dead and like just returned after 4 years, and also because of the crystal that he stole.
He's famous because he stole a crystal?
Yeah, because the crystal has, what's it called, it like the crystal is like undiscovered to the rest of the world. It's only like discovered like with the tribe, and it has healing properties.
Oh, it has like replicable, clear, magical healing abilities?
Yeah, so it has like a supernatural property.
Okay. And does this play a major role in the story too?
Um, I would say yes, because what's it called? Near the end of the story, people like start to connect the dots as to like where the crystal like came from, and so they try and like find the island where the tribesmen live.
Okay. There's a lot going on here, and this is reading as like a little bit scattered and unfocused to me, just because it seems like the story that you're describing is a little bit different than the one that's in the logline. This doesn't make any mention of magic healing crystals or his father being famous, or like I'm just struggling to picture from this logline how much time are we spending. Like what is the majority of what we're watching in this movie? Like what are we watching people do? And what is we're looking for like a tangible goalpost for the most part, which is to say, like a lot of movies, like if you've seen a movie like August Rush or something like that, it's about a kid trying to find his parents, right? And that's the goalpost. Once he finds them, then we understand that they never intended to leave him or whatever, so that will be fulfilling his goal, and they're going to love him and accept him once he gets there. So that's like the end goal of that movie. You're sort of saying he meets the dad pretty early, and it's not that hard to, so then his goal changes halfway through, or like a little more, less perhaps than halfway through. What does his goal change to once he actually meets with the father, beyond just adjust to life here? Because that's kind of passive and intangible, isn't it? It's just like, I just need to live. What is his goal change? It seems like your character's goal changes after he finds the father, doesn't it?
Like his overall goal is to get close to his father and like get to know him.
Okay. Did he not have parents of his own on the island that raised him?
So he only had his mother on the island, and he always like felt like kind of like different from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's all okay, and I think that like the basic elements of this are kind of in place. I'm just struggling to see it in this logline. So maybe try to rephrase this using our little template that we have here, even if it seems like, how do I possibly fit this into this template? But say, when inciting incident occurs, so when he learns that it might be what it sounds like to me is when it might be even him. Wait, so you're saying he gets to the modern world less than halfway through the movie, like perhaps even like 20 minutes in?
Oh, definitely not. Like,
oh, definitely not.
I would say that he gets to the modern world probably like 35 to 40 minutes into the film.
Oh, okay. So
because like the beginning of the film is like a flashback of like how the father like got onto the island and what he did there, just so that there's like a background so that like people understand.
Well, we're not really flashing back to anything. That's just kind of the story is starting, right? You can't start with the flashback, because flashback is when we go back in time chronologically from where we currently are. So this is actually, in fact, the beginning of the timeline. So you're saying that he gets to the sort of modern world around page 35, then very quickly finds his father, and then his goal is, I need to just get closer to this guy. Again, kind of just getting closer to someone. It works in some dramas if like you can frame it around something. Like, you can see why so many teen coming-of-age movies, right? They'll have some kind of event. They'll add, like, what I call a battle of the bands towards the end, where it's like, I don't know, we understand that the characters' internal journeys will sort of hinge around trying to win this contest. And it's not to say that you have to have some kind of like very artificial thing like that. But if you can have some kind of tangible physical thing that we're like, how do we know when he's gotten close enough to his father? Is he trying to convince his dad to come back to the island? Something like that would be a little more tangible. You see how we can just find something more concrete that you can say your character is trying to do, and then we'll be able to understand what we're watching a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just gave you a bunch of feedback. Any big questions?
Like how like would you suggest that I change my log line so it fits more to my story? Like, or do you think that what's it called? This is like a good starting point?
It's a fine starting
should I
point. Yeah, no, of course it's a fine starting point. I would scroll up in the chat a little bit, and you'll find here. I'll repost it for you. But this is our template. I'll say rewrite the logline using this. Try to fit it. Just like fill in the blanks if you need to. Keeping in mind like stakes, ticking clock being the thing that is like a device that, or something bad that will happen eventually if we don't accomplish our goal by now or by a certain point. Try to rewrite it along these lines. Just fill these in, and I think that you'll start to kind of phrase it in a way that is working a little more for a feature film. And then feel free to repost it by the end of class if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sounds original, though. I didn't expect the healing crystals and stuff. All right, we have time for a few more. Let's go to Joe Toole.
Hey, can you hear me?
We hear you. You have me a little quiet, so I'm going to turn up your volume, but shouldn't be a big deal. Go ahead and read your logline out for us.
Okay, the title is Chiaroscuro. Genre is drama and art. And the logline is, after the most expensive painting in a gallery disappears on his watch, an insecure security guard must track it down to prove his worth.
Must track it down to prove his worth. Does he actually, is he assigned to track it down, or does he just decide to track it down?
He on his own accord tries to track it down.
Okay, so he's in fact not supposed to be doing this, I would guess. He's a security guard, not a detective, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so he must track it down to prove... That's in his mind, though. That's like his goal in his brain. So that makes this kind of an internal goal. Is there an actual ticking clock, or like stakes beyond he's just insecure and doesn't want to have done a bad job at work?
Yeah, I knew this would happen. Okay. So the idea is essentially, this is one of the things I'm actually struggling with mostly. That's why I was focusing on asking you questions about stakes.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that, one of the main conflicts within the story comes from the fact that he also wants to be an artist. And the idea is that, so it's difficult to fit in without actually...
How is it relevant?
So the idea is that simultaneous to him trying to find this artwork, he's also tempted to replace it with his own.
Replace it with his own? What does that mean?
Well, like since the artwork goes missing, they open up a new gallery essentially, a new opening essentially to get new artists as quick as they can for a new gallery that they're opening to replace this artwork that's gone missing. And in that, he is also, because he's also trying to be an artist, which is the reason he's a security guard in the first place.
I don't see this as particularly pertinent or germane to the logline. I think you only have so many words to use in a logline, and you're better off telling us what we're interested in. Like, who's the antagonist? What are we? What's the obstacle? What's the conflict he's trying to track down a painting? Is that a dangerous journey? Are there people trying to are there dangerous people he's trying to get it from? Is there like some kind of interesting level of stakes or ticking clock here? I think that's what we're missing from this. I like the setup of painting goes missing, security guard decides to track it down on his own. That's cool, but what's the danger? This is a noir.
Yeah, that's one of the difficulties I'm running in, because he's in an environment where there's not actually a lot of conflict outside of his status, which is
his status as a security guard.
Well, again, it's a social hierarchy it's not like a massive deal. That's part of the point.
Sure. Okay.
Is part of his attempts to get the artwork back and to complete the other artwork are in an attempt to move up this hierarchy.
Right, but I don't get the sense from this logline that he's getting into more and more danger. And like, what is so? This is the noir stories are usually going to be about a protagonist coming up against some kind of force that is oppressively evil or more competent than they are, and they're struggling against things that are bigger than them. Right. So I want to get a better sense of the opposition and the things that are going to make this interesting, like the conflict in this.
Yeah, this is what I'm so struggling. It's because the main conflict that actually comes into like a physical barrier, in a sense, in this journey, it comes only at the midpoint.
Okay.
And I don't really know how to implement it.
Let me ask you this: who stole the painting?
The idea is that he actually doesn't find it.
He never finds it.
The idea is, yeah.
Does he even get close?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the point. Is that we like him. Just say it's like a detective movie. Like the idea is that he's following clues the entire movie, and the idea is that every time he seems to like have an understanding of like who has stolen it, some type of reversal will come, and he keeps thinking he's closer and closer and closer and closer to an answer.
But who stole it? You're saying you don't even know, or it doesn't matter who stole it?
No, it's quite literally the theme of the story is essentially simultaneous to him trying to find this painting. He's also trying to find meaning in his life. And
but who stole the painting? It just seems so kind of like.
I know, but it's the idea of it is to flip it on its head in the sense that him not finding an answer as a meaning to life essentially is meant to be also represented by the fact that he doesn't find it.
But this is all thematic stuff. What are we watching a guy come up against in the movie? If you're saying he himself is the sort of like one of your comps is Whiplash, for instance, right? So if in a sort of Whiplash type way he's getting obsessed with finding this painting in such a way that's damaging his personal life, I would imagine that's interesting, and I can see the progression of that. If he's getting like dangerously obsessed with this case, I could perhaps see how there would be stronger sense of like danger here. But right now, if you're saying he doesn't even get close to finding, he's just chasing down random leads, right?
Like imagine it's essentially like imagine the entirety of Whiplash. Mm-hmm. The idea is like he doesn't go back into the stage at the end. I know that you don't get this big dramatic ending, but the idea is that the themes throughout my story will actually give you the emotional satisfaction.
We're just in a logline. We're just looking for what are we watching, though. Like
I know, but again, that's sort of that's what I'm asking advice on, because I don't actually know what I can. The only real people, like I know what you're asking for is essentially like an opposition of sorts. The opposition are the people that he works with and who he's interrogating. And the idea is that not all of them are seemingly lying, but all of them seem seemingly like suspicious, essentially. And the difficulty is that none of them have the same morals as him. So he's slowly becoming relying on more and more desperate measures to try to find this thing.
Meaning he's like starting to hurt people and break the law?
No, essentially more like he's towards the end it will be like he ends up stealing the very thing that he's stealing from the very place that he's trying to protect. But essentially, at that point, the idea is that it's hard to explain in like 5 minutes. But like the idea is that when he realizes that no one else actually gives a shit, like the idea is that he's trying to find this artwork to prove his worth to the other security guards who are like, you fucked up, you did your job wrong. His boss and all these people that he works with, but also the people that are there to see the art, are all going, oh my god, this guy like fucked it up. The idea is that he thinks like he needs to find this thing to actually prove that he still has actually any validity. And the idea is that essentially he's become so obsessed with like trying to get this done because he knows if he doesn't find it within like the next few days, they're going to replace it with something else, and mission over, like he doesn't have a chance of actually proving it.
Okay, so the stakes just seem stakes and urgency just seem sort of low to me. Like you're right that we don't really have any sense of position. If he himself is posing some kind of like danger to either, like if his own obsession is kind of what is driving the movie, I just think we need a higher sense of danger here. And it's just, if it's just going to be a guy going around interviewing people to try to find a painting that he never finds, and that danger is not that doesn't sound like the danger is escalating throughout the movie. Do you see how we need to kind of
assume he does find it then? Like,
okay,
that's what I'm gonna assume he does find it. Is that still the case? Like, does it still seem like that's not ramping up?
When does he find it? At the end or in the middle, or where?
Let's say he finds it at the end, like right at the end.
If he finds it at the end, then that would be the conclusion to his journey. But I still don't know, how is the danger increasing over the course of the journey?
Essentially, the fact that he becomes more and more desperate. The fact that this time that he needs to find it by starts to shrink.
So he is the sort of danger.
What was that, sorry?
So he is the danger, is what you're saying. His own behavior is getting more unhinged and is exacting a higher sort of cost on his life.
Pretty much. Like, he's relying on the idea is that originally it's just like little lies. It's him trying to pretend to be someone he's not, to try and gain the trust of people around him. But then it becomes like he realizes everyone seems to be lying to him, so he becomes like more immoral in terms of like how the extent of the lie gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just dives deeper and deeper and deeper, and then shit keeps unraveling. And the idea is right at the end, as he thinks, he starts to essentially realize that, like, through this desperation, as the time to finish this gets closer and closer and closer, he realizes that no one else actually gave a shit about trying to find this, and the people that he's trying to actually impress don't actually care. So that's when he himself ends up stealing an artwork himself.
Okay. So we're just in the last few minutes, I do want to check in with these two people who reposted their log lines, but I will say, just for like my overall note for you, find a way in the log line to suggest what the escalating danger of this movie will be, even if it's your main character himself, his own obsession, the cost and toll that it's taking on his, I don't know, sanity, personal life. Like, just find a way to work that in so that we feel like, oh, this will be a journey that will be getting harder as it goes on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to check in with our two students who have rewritten their loglines. Thank you for trying these again. So, Thomason, let's take a look. So, this is a lot of words. So, after the return of a satanic cult from her family's past who murdered her parents in front of her as a child, a traumatized trans woman must confront them once they kidnap her ex-boyfriend. Oh my, I can't even say this in one breath, Thomason. I think this is great. Sorry. This is great stuff. This is like much more specific and much more interesting. But you need to have... we got to say this in like one breath, or else it's just going to seem like so overstuffed. But let me just read through it to make sure that I'm getting it. So, okay, a traumatized trans woman must confront them once they kidnap her ex-boyfriend and begin to stalk and kill her loved ones who want her to bear the child of Satan and/or, don't do and/ors, or be put forth as a sacrifice in a blood ritual. She must learn how to fully face the childhood trauma they contributed that still haunts her adult life. We can cut that last sentence. Okay, so give it like 25 words, if you can. Condense this down, and you've given us like multiple inciting incidents here. What's the actual inciting incident? Once they kidnap her ex-boyfriend, that's kind of interesting. I mean, her ex isn't quite as urgent, but like, when they kidnap her boyfriend is a good hook into that story, because that's like saying, not only are they back, they have taken something from me, and that's something urgent and dangerous and pressing, right? Something to grab us in and pull us into that story. So you've got a lot more of the elements here. This is going to be the act of refining this down to one sentence of like 25 to 30-ish words.
Okay.
And give us only 2 comps. This is too many comps.
Sorry.
No, don't say sorry.
I'm barely good at this. I'm just like, oh my god, I'm such a mess.
No, it's all good. This is for all experience levels, so like it doesn't matter. Like, you're here to just get feedback and to learn how to get feedback and just to learn and improve. That's what we're in class for. So yeah, just this is much improved, even though it's too much. Just remove stuff from this and refine this down and make this simple and concise and elegant.
And you'd say like a 25 limit.
It's not a hard. I didn't even count that out. I just picked a number, but like, try to say it out loud and you shouldn't be exhausted by the end of saying it.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, careful throwing Scream in there. Unless this has an actual comedic edge to it, or like kind of metafiction comedy kind of, what Scream is like. So just careful with your comps, because we will read from them that that's the tone. If that's not the tone, then don't include that in the comps, because you also have like Hereditary on here. That doesn't have a comedic edge at all. So like it's you got to pick your lane. Make sense?
Okay. Yes.
All right. Thanks so much. Looking much improved though.
Thank you.
All right, and we're over time by just a little bit, so remember, scriptcamp.net/membership, and you can sign up for the bootcamp. You get 2 weeks free trial. That's like 2 full classes 2 full bootcamp classes plus additional classes during the week, all for free to decide if you like this first. It's a pretty good value, so sign up. Feel free to head out now if you want, because we're at the end of our time, but I do want to give KJ one more pass on this logline that she has revised. Okay, hi KJ. So when a teenager who grew up in a tribe discovers that his biological father lives in a foreign land, he embarks on a journey to find his father in order to get to know him. However, he is unaware of his father's past on the island and blindly walks into an unknown land as the United States. Okay, so I would cut the second sentence here. You can do this in one sentence, I promise you. I know it seems impossible at first to do this in one sentence, but you can do it. So, when and pick an adjective for your teenager that describes him personally. Is he sheltered? Is he, like, think of something that would imply the journey that he has to make here, right? So let's say when a sheltered teenager on a remote island, perhaps, we want to avoid these clauses like when he did this, semicolons are like a big red flag too, that you have too many thoughts in your logline. So when a sheltered teenager on a remote island discovers that his biological father lives, and I would probably be more specific here, but in a foreign land, sure, we'll accept it for now, lives in a foreign land, he embarks on a journey to find him in order to get to know him. This does, again, make it sound like the journey is the meat and majority of the movie, though.
Yeah, I need to work on that.
Yeah, it might just be that you're not sure exactly what the meat of the movie, have you written some version of this before, or is this brand new for you?
I've written a treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just found it really hard to, summarize the treatment, which was, a few pages, so... I found it a bit difficult to summarize it in a sentence.
It's all good. Writing loglines is not super easy. But I will say, if we need to summarize, imagine Act 2 of your movie, so pages 25 to 55, that's kind of what you're telling us about in the logline. So if you spend all your words saying he embarks on a journey to find his dad, that makes me imagine, this is going to be Life of Pi, or one of those movies where someone's making a trip on a boat from one place to another, all is lost, or you see what I mean? That's what we're going to be imagining. But in fact, if the meat of the movie takes place when he arrives there, you might want to start the logline later and say something like, when a sheltered teenager from a small island tracks down his father, comma, right? Is that where the movie kind of gets started? Is that what kind of push it is? Okay, so try reframing it along those lines, and then you'll say what he must do from there.
Okay.
And we don't need the second clause saying he's unaware of his father's past and he walks into this unknown land that's all just kind of thematic and background stuff. Don't worry about that. So one sentence, tell us what the meat of the movie is. When the story gets going, an adjective character must conflict or else / before stakes would be nice. And it sounds like you do have a lot of stakes that are not kind of hinted at here. If you can get at that, then I would. But it sounds like there's more going on than just he's trying to get to know his dad. You've got all this stuff about his dad is famous for stealing a crystal and stuff like that. So try to hint at, what is he trying to do? What is his tangible goal for the movie? And it's tough to summarize, I know, but you can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I might just last note, I might reconsider the title Cairo. There's a pretty famous Japanese horror movie called Cairo that is spelled just like this.
Really?
It's a different genre. It doesn't matter that much, but Google it. It's from 2001.
I was unsure about the title, anyways. So I'll work on it.
Is it the kid's name?
Yes.
That's fine. You can do it. Just be aware. It's like calling your movie Seven Samurai or whatever. It's There's a famous movie called that, so you might just want it. Titles are not super important, and you can always change it, but just something to be aware
Yeah.
of.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is a much improved version. I think that you've shown right here that you can, in fact, condense and summarize this. Just keep at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, KJ. Okay, we're at the end of our class, and we're at the end of our feature bootcamp intro, which means that we are starting up with this class soon. Nacho posted the timeline. February 18th is week 1. That's the day after tomorrow. So 4 o'clock, the day after tomorrow, we will be getting going with this class. I hope to see you guys there with the refined loglines. And you don't have to pay a single dollar if you just sign up for the free trial. You can show up for that, show up for the next one, and get a sense of if you want to continue in this course. I think there's a lot that you will be able to gain from this, so I hope to see everyone who showed up today at the first class on Friday. All right, thanks so much, guys. We'll see you around Script Camp, and have a great night.